I probably come to you with some prejudices. I probably come to you with some frustrations, some of which you may detect along the way. But I come also as, first and foremost, a person of faith. Someone that, regardless of what I did for a living or whose child I was always raised with the understanding that God did not create junk and that all of us have value and all of us matter. And I'd like to believe that's the way in which I've carried myself as an individual and as a police officer, as a priest, and now as a bishop. There's lots of scripture, obviously, we've heard that refer to this responsibility we have to neighbor. Leviticus 19 is probably the one that you've heard the most, which says, "The alien who resides with you shall be to you as the citizen among you. You shall love the alien as yourself. For you were aliens in the land of Egypt, and I am the Lord your God." I believe that the way that we treat immigrants, the way we respond, is an issue of faith. I believe that the laws and the policies that we use in this issue must uphold human dignity of every person, each who is formed in the image of God. No exceptions. As I've often said when I visit churches on Sunday, when they say all are welcomed, I've challenged them all to show me where the asterisk is on that sign. And I've yet to find it. My opinion is that any legislation, any policy which restricts access to basic services, to things that anyone else would have access to, purely based on someone's national origin, and for that matter, sexual orientation, gender, etc., is wrong. And I think any policy or any law that penalizes the church or humanitarian organizations which attempt to provide services to those in need violates our beliefs. That's where I come from. I believe we put our faith into action when we demonstrate radical hospitality and solidarity for all people, including the immigrant and the refugee. And I believe, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later on, we have this nervousness when we start to get the whiff that the church is getting involved in politics. I've heard enough in my 1 year as bishop saying, "Bishop, you're walking a very fine line that makes us uncomfortable." Which to my response is, look at the Gospels. You've been walking that line a long time. And now, it's not that that line is moved. It's that what's going on around us is changing. And now's the time to stand up and put what we continually say every Sunday into action. And so I do believe that we have a responsibility to advocate. And I believe that we have an obligation to ask our elected officials to conduct debates on this issue in a civil and respectful manner of all people, and to no longer use the immigrant to blame for our social and economic ills, or to stereotype an entire population based upon fear or prejudice. I will share with you that one of the most shocking experiences I had as a police officer was when I arrived on a scene of a group of construction workers who, in clearing land to build some houses, found a body in the woods that had been deceased for some time. And so when I arrived first, I asked the supervisor on that job site, who found the body? I need to speak with them. Now, mind you, my uniform had my name badge with simply J. McLoughlin. And without missing a beat, the supervisor said, "It was some of my Mexican workers. But good luck. Those damn spics don't speak a lick of English, and they're probably here illegally." And so when they came up and I began to speak with them in Spanish, I paused for a moment and turned to the supervisor and said, "I'm sorry, the J is for Jose. I'm a spic too." And don't kid yourself. You know it as well as I do. It continues. I overheard just 2 days ago, sitting in a restaurant, the people behind me talk about the nuisance of those beaners that live among us. We are living in a time where fear is driving our response. And my goal and my job to share some observations with you is to simply remind you that now more than ever, we have a responsibility to stand up. And we need to start being very clear and honest about what we're dealing with. And understand right now that on every side, fear is driving the conversation. Let me give you a little idea about what I walked into North Carolina as the place from where I serve as bishop. Since 1990, the population in North Carolina of Latinos has tripled. The Brookings Institute recently released a report, and it named Charlotte, North Carolina, as a major immigrant gateway. 2000 to 2010, the Latino populations in North Carolina doubled, becoming the 6th fastest growing in the U.S. And here's the thing, and it's not necessarily in cities. It's happening more and more in rural communities. On the economic side, there are more immigrant workers in North Carolina are in the labor force, 71.4%. Immigrant workers in the labor force in North Carolina, compared to those who identify themselves as native born in North Carolina, which is 62.4%. And the reason they cite it is because age-wise, more immigrants are in the working years than the native North Carolinians. Undocumented immigrants in North Carolina, 80% of whom have lived in the U.S. more than 5 years, represent over 15% of the state workforce. 20% are in agriculture alone. And North Carolina ranks 6th in the nation in the number of farm workers. 94% are native Spanish speakers. And by most accounts, the majority are presumed to be undocumented. And in North Carolina, Latinos have paid $2.5 billion combined in federal, state, local taxes in 2014. $1.4 billion paid by Latin American immigrants. And undocumented immigrants in North Carolina pay $285 million in state and local taxes. And if the undocumented were allowed to have a process towards citizenship, they've estimated roughly that the payments into the North Carolina tax system would increase at least to $125 million more. This issue has been an issue in Western North Carolina since I arrived. I'm not going to get political on you. Because of my years in Washington, I have learned that neither party has the corner on truth and ideas. I am a raging, out of control, unabashed independent. I belong to the party of Jesus. And I share that with you because of the fact that what I'm about to say sounds political, but it's the truth. I came in as the Bishop of Western North Carolina. Less than a month after I was ordained and consecrated, we elected a new president. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell you, from that time forward, in this issue alone, the anxiety and the fear that has been raised in my diocese is at epic proportions. from all levels. It has been a major topic of conversation. It is a conversation and something that I am asked at every visit, at every diocesan clergy gathering, and a major conversation among the leadership of the diocese. It has only heightened the anxiety and the fear among our immigrant population, even among those who are documented and legally here. That's the part people don't understand. It's raising fear across all immigrants, regardless of their status. I have been receiving emails at great numbers since that election, and the vast majority have been about the issue of immigration. I think because of the fact that they have a bishop named Jose, and that Spanish was my first language, I've had quite a few folks who are documented and undocumented reach out to me, expressing fear, expressing concern. And it broke my heart to read the letter from a young man who said that although he is here legally, he is so afraid for his family that he has decided to leave the United States. It is real. And sadly, once I released a letter expressing solidarity with our brothers and sisters who are immigrants, I too received some backlash of people on the other side who said some very unkind things, including some who questioned my own heritage. And I think you know what I'm getting at. The realities of people fearing for their safety is real. The decisions that people are making to leave are real. We have a church just south of Asheville, La Capilla de Santa Maria. It's about 98% Central American, mostly Mexican. Members stopped coming to church because they were afraid to be out in public other than going to work for fear of roadblocks or roundups. They had to cancel evening programs because the vast majority of the community was afraid to be out driving at night when there was less traffic, thus increasing their chance that they could get stopped. There were reports all over Western North Carolina about roundups. There was a report of a raid at a restaurant and where citizenship was being questioned. And then there has been the movement to really ramp up the work of these detention centers. Again, one thing is clear: the climate of fear is real. Fortunately, we have an organization called Nuestro Centro in Asheville, who has partnered with faith communities and other organizations in the Asheville metro area, who is provided a hotline. And they monitor a rumor control page on their webpage, as well as a hotline, so if there's any reports. And so their job has been, as these reports are being made, to go investigate and find out fact from fiction, because there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of stories being shared that aren't true. And so this organization has really been moving forward to get even more involved, to try to separate the fact from fiction, but also to be a great place of resources to faith communities and others to try to help to educate everyone. As I share with you, a letter of support to our immigrant brother and sisters came from me, and that caused a variety of responses. And fortunately, more good than bad. But one thing was clear when you read a lot of that correspondence, and I was sharing earlier, that what's happened now is the word immigration has become a negative word. The Mexican has become the poster child for criminal and illegal. That's the reality. And when you sort through some of these emails and the words that you see from people who are objecting to my words or thinking that this is the right move for the country to start clamping down, it's clear that there's a complete lack of understanding. They don't even know the realities. In spring of 2017, there was a multi-faith process, an effort by church leaders and judicatory leaders to make an expression of solidarity as a community with our immigrant brothers and sisters in Western North Carolina, centered out of Asheville. One of the fortunate things is that Asheville is one of those few little sort of beacons of kind of diverse thinking in the midst of sometimes a little bit more closed thinking. And it resulted in 131 communities of faith coming together to sign officially a document expressing solidarity and a calling for change from our leaders. It culminated in a march and then a press conference at the end. And this is where I'm going to dive into an issue that I'm so glad that Danielle's here, because this is where the rubber really hits the road, and it continues to be the biggest issue. In the midst of that press conference, many faith leaders, clergy all around, citizens standing there showing support, one reporter simply asked this question: I'd like to ask all those faith communities represented if any of you here have decided and made a determination to declare yourselves a sanctuary church. Crickets. One hand out of 131 people raised their hand. And the person stepped forward and said, we have, but we don't have a physical plant big enough to hold anyone. The silence that fell over that room was deafening. And so it was clear that one of the things and one of the challenges that became to the forefront for us was the conversation about sheltering. And so, in my sort of response, rushed around crazy to try to find out what are the resources, and looked to the chancellor for some guidance, talked to other bishops. Episcopal Migration Ministries put something out. The Office of Government Relations for the Episcopal Church had something out. The Episcopal Policy Network, ACLU. And so what we decided to do was to put this information out, and I took the step of saying, I'll support all of you whatever your decision may be, knowing full well that the legal ramifications could be challenging. And so it continues to be a conversation among our congregations. I have spoken to 2 congregations in their vestry who have asked me to speak a little bit more in depth about the impact. And so right now I have potentially 2 congregations that in the very near future may identify themselves as actual shelter. But here's the thing that's important, and this is the part and the opportunity it provided for me as bishop to raise this issue. Because I think, once again, another misnomer and misunderstanding about this conversation was that when we were talking about sanctuary, it's important to understand that sanctuary is not simply shelter. And that's another area that we lose people because they say, we're not ready to do that. And I say back to them, the sanctuary movement is more than that, and there is something you can do. But the one thing that I have said to those that are considering shelter, and you'll hear it probably some more, is you must do your homework. You must understand the ramifications, and you must engage the congregation in that discussion. And I'm hoping the nuances and the complexities of issue of sheltering and harboring, all that, you'll touch some on, because that's an area that becomes very tricky. But it's important to understand that if you remember, the sanctuary movement really became an issue in the 80s. In the early 80s, when they were trying to create safe haven for people from Central America, refugees who were fleeing civil conflict. And the movement at that time was in response to the federal government's decision of how it would, in fact, give asylum or protect. And at the highest point in those early 80s, there were over 500 congregations in the United States that declared themselves as sanctuaries to actually provide shelter. And they were all over the map, from Lutheran, Methodist, Roman Catholic, Episcopal, etc. But again, it's important to understand that sanctuary is more than shelter. It's a wide range of support. And this is what I'd like to really leave you with to think about. And this is what I continue to challenge congregations to think about. The sanctuary movement of the 80s was more than shelter. It was providing material goods, education, legal advice, a variety of things that are sorely needed in these sorts of times. I'll be the first to say, the church loves to do these big sort of grand announcements. We love to stand in front of people and say, we're taking a stand on. And we like to have the press conferences and we like to have all this. Matter of fact, I used to joke that when I was with the Justice Department, you knew we were serious about something because we either declared war on it or we formed a task force. That's how you knew we were serious. But nothing comes of it. And I think one of the challenges and one of the things that I would urge you as people of faith is to not simply stop and think that you must do some grand statement or some grand thing to make a difference in this movement. A lot of what has to be done is what I'm calling the non-sexy stuff. The stuff that is so critically needed that churches have the ability to provide. And so I want to challenge you to not think about that you have to do something grand, but that you can do a lot of things on a local and small basis that will help the effort. The first step, I have to tell you, is you have to know your community. You have to know who is around you. You have to understand the demographics. You have to understand. And here's the thing. Talk to the people who are impacted. With all due candor and with all due love and with all due respect. Or what do they say in the South? Bless your heart. Nothing made me more frustrated when someone who did not have a Latino background trying to tell me about Latino lifestyle, or someone educating me on the Cuban conflict. They didn't have a relative thrown in jail or killed by Castro. You need to hear the stories. The only way you're going to truly be responsive is if you understand the stories of the people who are in your community. Know what's going on. Invite them to talk. Hold forums. Don't ever assume that you know. They are more than statistics. Every person you sit down is an individual story, an individual account that has to be heard. Educate yourselves. Understand this issue. It is complex. It is extremely complex. I'm grateful that I'm not in the legal profession anymore because the intricacies now about the process, the citizenship, and the constant changes through the DACA changes, all the things that are going on, it's complex. Hold forums. Invite people to help you understand what the current immigration process is. Invite people to share with you what is going on. The more that you're equipped with what's actually going on in the system and to what's actually being decided and what's actually being debated in your states and in your cities is huge, because that helps you to decide and determine what, in fact, you need to do going forward. One of the things that has just grown in our diocese is the number of classes for English as a second language. It has been in such demand, and many of our churches have stepped up and offered English as a second language for families who want to be able to speak the language and understand the process and are dying to learn the language. Talk with your city and county, state leaders. I cannot express enough about the importance of this. For months, all I have been doing is meeting with mayors, city council folks, county commissioners, chiefs of police, sheriffs. And let me give you a little secret. The vast majority of law enforcement officials have absolutely zero desire to enforce what is happening now and some of the increases in enforcement that are occurring. I've talked to various sheriffs in the state of North Carolina who have said that they will not deputize or allow their deputies to be deputized to be agents. They live and serve and work in these communities. They know the people well. Don't assume that those that are in leadership have a particular point of view. Many of them are concerned and do care and want to find ways in which to help the people there. But you need to know the truth. You need to know what's going on. One of the most amazing moments I ever witnessed was some years ago when I was the canon to the ordinary in the Diocese of Oklahoma. And we had an organization called the Oklahoma Conference on Churches. And this group was made up of judicatory leaders from all the denominations across the state. And there was a subcommittee of this group called the Impact Committee. And I was a part of that. And that committee was made up of people who represented the judicatory leaders. And our sole job was to go through all the proposed legislation that was coming up in the state legislature and using the 7 theological statements on immigration, poverty, education, to use that lens of those theological statements that those leaders made and to identify for them the laws and proposed laws that we thought violated those theological statements. And there was a year where the legislature in Oklahoma was trying to outdo Arizona when it came to immigration law. And I watched with tremendous power as an Archbishop of the Catholic Church and my Episcopal bishop sit in a very intimate setting in the office of the Speaker of the House, urging him to understand God's call to love and serve neighbor. It was one of the most powerful things I've ever witnessed. Within 36 hours, the legislation was dead. It's powerful stuff. Educate yourselves and understand and speak to those and share with them the concerns. And one of the things that's also been big, and I would encourage you to do, is continue to do, if you're not already doing them, provide the Know Your Right seminars. Those are important. Educate the people who are facing the potential law changes and the enforcement to let them know what their rights are in this process and invite them to be a part. Collaborate with other local churches. You will be amazed by the number of churches and other denominations who are doing incredible amounts of work. And there are some churches that may have a larger immigrant population than you do. And so they're more engaged or understanding. So it's important to make sure you identify those as well and work with them. Because one of the biggest areas right now that I will tell you that is not sexy but is strongly needed is legal services. Pisgah Legal Services is located in Western North Carolina and serves around 20 counties in Western North Carolina. It is probably one of 8 or 9 legal aid associations in the state of North Carolina, whose sole purpose is to help those that are poor, those that don't have access to legal, and especially for immigrants. Since November, the end of November of 2016, Pisgah Legal Services, their request for aid to immigrants has gone up 253%. Again, it's not sexy, but they need the funds to hire and pay the lawyers that are providing this legal advice. And this past summer, Pisgah Legal Services lost $535,000 in state funding. And now the latest budget that's just been proposed by the North Carolina General Assembly eliminates another $1 million for legal aid funding in the state. That's a huge area that you need to get involved in. And if you want a place to put some money, find that legal aid organization that's fighting for those immigrants and give them money. I decided at this last renewal of vows service in the spring, I talked to the clergy, and all the offertory went to Pisgah Legal Services for their work. Again, under the radar, but it's important work. And the last thing I will tell you about is about the advocacy portion. And I know this gets to be touchy for some, because we always get that the church shouldn't be involved in politics. And often the line between politics and social justice is a little blurred. But I believe there are some things that you can do for advocacy that are very much in keeping with who we are and our gospel. First and foremost, we have to advocate to respect for and the recognition of the human dignity of every person. Every immigrant should have the respect and recognition of human dignity. We need to provide an opportunity for immigrants who are already contributing to come out of the shadows, regularize their status, and whatever criteria need to be set up in order for them, reasonable criteria I think is an important thing to say, in order for them to pursue a legal option something we should be talking about. I think we need to reform our family-based immigration system to significantly reduce family separations and waiting times for separated families to be reunited. One of the biggest things that were going on in Western North Carolina, and Episcopal Legal Services was involved in, there was a move in which parents were trying to get guardians for their children who were born here so that if they were in fact deported, they would have a place to go. We should not have a system that threatens and separates families. Somebody asked me when I spoke about this the other day, they interrupted me and said, "Bishop, I think all you're doing is you're just telling us that we need to violate the law." And I said, no, listen closely. The creation of legal avenues for immigrant workers and their families to migrate here and work safe, legally, in an orderly manner with their rights protected. Look, I think I bring a little credibility on the legal side, having been a police officer and a Justice Department official. I would never talk about openly violating the law. But here's the fundamental problem, and let's be real about it. Right now, there are abuses in the system going on. Those rights aren't being guaranteed. And if we continue to create policies that take more rights away, well, I think that's problematic. And so we have to be clear that if the process was such that would allow a way in which for people to become legal, existed, and it was accessible, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So I think we have to be very clear about the fact that we have a responsibility to say that we need to provide access and encourage the leaders to provide access of rights for everyone involved. And I have a friend who's a border agent, so I'm going to tell you this. And he said the same thing to me. He said to me that we should be urging for border protection policies that are consistent, and these are his words, that are consistent with humanitarian values and treat all individuals with respect, while allowing us to carry out the critical task of identifying the people who are truly dangerous and represent a threat to our country. And we must continue to fight and make sure that there are no policies that are advanced that penalizes a church for extending ministry of hospitality and advocacy to immigrants present in our community. Those are some of the key things when we talk about advocacy. I'm not proposing us to go and violate laws. I'm simply saying at the very core of who we are as people of God is to respect the dignity of every human being. And the more that we can encourage the conversation to be brought in a civil manner with the understanding that all involved deserve the dignity, then I think the conversation and the work we could do together would be advanced that much more. So I hope some of these things I share with you help a little bit, but until you really understand it, until you really speak to those involved, until you're ready to make that commitment, it's not going to change. And we need to stop the fear, and we need to stop to accelerate the environment that the minute that someone uses the word immigrant, it is thought of something negative. I hope some of that has helped. And so I look forward to hear from my other colleagues here. Thank you for your time.
So our next group is a panel of three people, Reverend Fabio Sotelo, Reverend Carolyn McGee, and Reverend Tom Haygood from the Presbyterian Church. So I'm going to let them come up and just go ahead and start their conversation with you.
I'm Carolyn McGee. I'm the assistant rector at St. Bede's Episcopal Church in Tucker with Fabio. And so we've divided up our time a little bit. I'll give some of the framework. really feel like God blessed me by putting me in Tucker at St. Bede's. I had not done any work significantly with people who've immigrated before, and if you want to learn about resilience and hope, hang out with people who have really fought for their lives to come here. It has changed my heart being around people who have to put in so much effort just to build a life. And nobody comes here as an immigrant or a refugee because everything is awesome and there's plenty of opportunities in the place from which they came. You can ask people who've come from El Salvador about that if you come to our Latin American Food Festival on September 9th from 10 to 1. You want to come to that. We're raising money for our fund that we use for small donations to support families that need support when a member has been deported or held at ICE. So these are all things that we can talk about. So my overarching framework is this is nothing to do with doing things for somebody else. We're really excited about transforming the heart of our community as it already is. And that begins with just sharing the story of who our community is here in Georgia, really wherever you live. I'm in a place where it's very visible and active, but if you are a person who eats food or lives in a structure of some sort, or has received medical care, or has any sort of caregiving work at all anywhere in your universe, and any kind of service work, then 9 chances out of 10 you are in relationship with people who have come here either as immigrants or refugees. It's just a matter of the scales being loosed from the eyes so we can see and interact better with our actual community as it is right now. I think one thing that, stop it. My phone is intimidating to me. One thing politicians have been unfortunately very successful at is convincing us that somehow if a politician is talking about something, we are not to be talking about that same something as the church. That is false. That is a silencing technique. So we always, always can speak for justice and equality and appropriate treatment of God's children. We always can do that. And sometimes that means we'll have to engage in political sectors, but we aren't to be made quiet because politicians have a perspective on something and are putting it out there. I think that's a functioning separation of church and state, is that the state cannot tell me to shut up about justice. So we have a great role to participate in reframing the story, how we speak about immigrants and refugees. This criminalization language, it is a shift over several decades. And we have opportunity to reclaim that. One of the first ways we can do that is through preaching and sharing in our scripture stories, Bible studies, whenever there's opportunity to reflect on texts, considering what this is saying to us about people who might have come as immigrants or refugees, or what a community looks like. What is a healthy community? What were the people of Israel, what were the blessings God was promising as the people got moved and transitioned and separated? What was going on there? The Bible also can become very convicting when you're reading it. We looked at the text just last week about the Egyptians were terrified by the Israelites who had come in, and so they put them all to work. And I think the words were to work with brick. It was ruthless work in brick and mortar and and labor of the field. And we all just sat there like, well, this is a little bit on the nose. It's hard to miss seeing how people who have come into a new land become mistreated by people who consider the land their own, which of course in the United States is kind of a laugh riot if you go deep into our beginnings. But these are stories we can begin to expose, and we have opportunities every week to do that and explore those. Sharing personal stories. Fabio brought up a really good point when we were talking about this the other day. First thing, yes, have people come and share their stories. It is really, I think it's been a big part of how St. Bede's community heart has changed over time. We've gone in maybe 18 months from a parish who really balked at the idea of the "We welcome immigrants and refugees" sign to like, yeah, that's our sign. And a lot of that has been sharing of the stories and hearing from people who have come here from El Salvador or from Colombia or from Mexico. And they're just trying to build lives and raise their families, and it's no different from anybody else anywhere. And I think that story sharing's been part of that transformation. But Fabio also said that everyone can share their story. Each of us has an experience somewhere of feeling like a stranger in a strange land, or feeling like you're not getting any support trying to build your life, or feeling ostracized. And the more we can connect to stories that immigrants and refugees share, even though, I mean, I hear the stories of the drama many of those people I've met have emerged from. I have no experience like that. But we can share some of the feelings and understandings. If you don't know people to come speak, Fabio and I can connect you. Lots of other Episcopal communities around can connect you up with people. We can solve that problem if you'd like a speaker to come and you're not sure who. That's something we can work on together. But within your own system, you all can share stories in this way. Having an attorney or a nonprofit speaker, New American Pathways is right up near St. Bede's, lots and lots of refugee work, but they're doing a lot of sharing about laws that affect refugees and immigrants alike. And they have wonderful speakers who can come and share stories. So that's one place you might look at, or Cook Immigration Partners has just been amazing and generous with their time and education, and lots of other immigration attorneys I think would be willing to come and speak to a gathering, whether it included people who have immigrated here or not. It's just to increase education, and if you are in a congregation or place where we need to raise the comfort level with this conversation, sometimes hearing from nonprofit workers or attorneys or just people out in the field can help raise people's level of tolerance for this discussion. Celebrating the positives of what is going on and who is taking action. For example, the city of Houston over and over has been putting out notices saying we are not at any shelter checking your immigration status. It is not important. And these are coming up in Spanish and in English. And I see them on Twitter. They're getting retweeted by lots of people who aren't in Houston. But that's a great thing to share, because part of the anxiety in Houston is there was worry that if I show up at a shelter, I'm going to get pulled for my documentation status. So like people could die because of that fear. This is not acceptable, right? This is a sin. That's an obvious one. But the city of Houston is countering that with this message of welcoming and sharing. And by sharing, if a congregation or community is feeling anxious about getting involved in criminal activity or something, the city of Houston's not doing anything criminal. They're welcoming their people. They're protecting people, and they're putting that out there. So you can become a megaphone for, look what the city of Houston's doing. One of the major issues on deck right now is DACA. In fact, that's becoming quite urgent. There's tremendous anxiety that deferred action for childhood arrivals will be changed within the week. But Lindsey Graham, Republican senator from South Carolina, is one of the huge proponents of a bill called, I think it's DREAM, right? The DREAM Act. And he will be, so I was on a call about this about a month ago, talking about, you know, what will we do if DACA does get pulled? DACA was always meant to be a gap fill for Congress to figure out a better legislative fix. Well, it's a Republican senator, and he's joined, and I've forgotten the Democrat who's with him on it. Anyway, there's two of them working together, strong proponents of a fix for that bill, so that people who came here as children, were raised here, don't have a home to go back to. This is their home. Will have a way to stay in this country, have a path to citizenship and remaining here. Right now, if you achieve the age of majority, you can keep applying every 2 years, but there's no fix. There's no way to become a permanent resident or citizen of the United States. So Lindsey Graham took time out of his day to get on that phone call with us. It was a random group of faith leaders and some other people interested in this issue to say, I'm I'm excited about this bill, I'm behind it, and if the evangelical faith community can get behind this legislation, I think we can pass it. We have a chance. So this is part of our job for communities that are ready for this kind of advocacy, and it's bipartisan, so it does take away if anyone is suggesting, well, this is too partisan. It's not, it's shared. Oh, and Don Plummer's saying, Caroline, you could talk about this all day, but you have to stop. I really could. But celebrate those things with your people. Again, it kind of raises comfort with that. I've got 3 listservs you might want to join. National Immigration Forum, Latin American Association, that's right here in Georgia. They have all kinds of advocacy alerts and opportunities, and New American Pathways. And then we'll hear about New Sanctuary in a minute. But all 3 of those are putting out alerts and information all the time that are good for sharing and education. I'm going to leave this book with Fabio because I'm going to have to duck out, but this book is, if you need personal stories, There Goes the Neighborhood, How Communities Overcome Prejudice and Meet the Challenge of American Immigration. This was written by the executive director of the National Immigration Forum. Lots and lots of personal stories in here if you need to pull something from that. And the last thing I'll say is to demonize no one. It does no good to demonize the Border Patrol or ICE or any individual. That is not helpful. We're here to tell an alternative story where all people are treated with dignity and as people who come with gifts and skills that we need. It makes all of us better if we have our immigrants and refugees living whole and flourishing lives. Okay, that's not all I got, but another time. Fabio? I will sing it.
Buenas tardes. I came up with 10 ways we respond to the immigration crisis in St. Bede's community. 10 ways. And I put it in a piece of paper, so if anybody is interested, you can take it home and go through it. These are not the only ways. This is just what we try to do here in St. Bede's. And I have to say that even though I am here talking, this doesn't mean that I am doing the work. The community is doing the work, and I have here people from St. Bede's. I have the senior warden here, and many other people who are involved helping the immigrants in different ways. And I also have representatives for the community of St. Edward's in Lawrenceville. So these are the 10 aspects that I found. The first I want to emphasize is that we always think about how we can help immigrants, and we have to discover those ways. And there are many ways, again. But the way that is not allowed for all of us is to be paralyzed and to be afraid and to decide to do nothing. I really feel like a church that is, in these circumstances, historical circumstances of the United States, is going through with immigration and be quiet about that. I really do not want to be part of that church. The community that I serve in St. Bede's is a community of, many people ask me how many are documented and how many are not. And it is very hard to find, to know that. But one thing I know is that they are mixed, all of them in general. So meaning perhaps some members of the families are undocumented and some members are documented. In many cases, as you know, the children are documented, some parents are not. So even if those who are American citizens, they are sharing the pain of the undocumented people. The first thing that we do, and we started, was listening to the stories to the people, from the people. And since I go in contact with them and create a sense of trust, that is a safe place to share stories. So some undocumented immigrants who have been detained, have been in detention centers, they have come up to share their stories. And it's unbelievable how those stories are changing hearts and culture in the church. I believe because of the power of a couple of those stories, some people from the parish were willing to go to visit detainees in Stewart in the detention center. Sharing the stories because, again, the bishop already said, Bishop Jose is immigrants. But I find I have been working with immigrants for 20 years. I was here, I am from Colombia. I came here with a religious visa to work for immigrants, and I am still doing that. And so what I find in these 20 years working with the immigrants are great people, great values, hard workers, very committed. That is what I have in the church. I have not found, honestly, any criminal in my church. I think I preach against criminality, so therefore they don't come, I guess. We invited the people, and that was during Palm Sunday, to do a pilgrimage on immigration, to walk and pray on the way. And we went from the church to an immigration building. And we had over 100 people walking, and many of those people are here today from different churches coming together and walking together. That was beautiful. And one of the things that I saw in that pilgrimage is that many of the undocumented and with their children, they walk with us. But of course, they wouldn't have walked in that pilgrimage, or they wouldn't have started a pilgrimage on their own. Another aspect is to preach on the issue. We need to be prophets, exercise our prophetic role. We cannot, again, be quiet about it. Then make ourselves available to immigrants. Make ourselves available to immigrants. I give my cellular phone to immigrants. It's easy for them to find me and to text me. And many of them, before it goes into the news, they call me and they say, there is a raid, a blocked road here. And I do. I'm sorry, but I do. I send a text to everybody, say, avoid these roads. And then I try to meet the people, meet the family of those who have been detained. What are their needs? Do they have food? Do they have money to pay the rent? Do they have money for transportation? Where are your kids? And believe me, people they are looking for somebody that they can trust. And they open their houses. I remember, for example, we went with Megan to one apartment, and she was telling us the story of somebody who was detained, and giving us the information, and giving all the information to us. I said, we need a letter of support. I need to find citizens who are willing to write a letter for my relative. And connect with other churches and communities. We cannot do this alone. It's overwhelming for one church. It's affecting many, the entire neighborhood. So we need to work together. Offer workshops on immigration, invite leaders, invite attorneys, share the resources that we have, provide resources to the immigrants, even invite the immigrants to develop a plan. Many people are paralyzed, they are afraid, they don't know where to start. Sometimes we need to take them by hand and say, this is the way. Last night I was talking to a lady who has 2 children, and she's undocumented. I said, do you have a plan? And she said, no. I said, what do you need? I don't have a computer. I don't know how to start. So invite people from the community to say, are you willing to come in the evening to talk to somebody and fill out papers and help them to develop the plan. Visit people who are detained, go to El Refugio. And in Refugio, they are always asking for carry-on baggages and jeans and tennis shoes. So it's an opportunity for the communities to help. I know that many people cannot go, but some of them can go. And it's interesting how undocumented people, a month ago, some of the members of the community and others from other churches, they went to El Refugio, and undocumented people were bringing jeans and shoes and carry-on baggages. I said, please take them to them. And that is a way how they want to help and be present in their difficulties that all of them are facing, all of us are facing. We have a network to connect. In that way, we can ask for those who are willing to write letters of support to the families. So what we do is we try to get as much information as we can from the detainee and offer that to the people who are willing to take the risk and write a letter, and then give the letter to somebody to take it to the attorney. And yes, ESL program. We do have an ESL program, and it's amazing how many people are involved. Last night we started over a break in the summer, and it was unbelievable. More than 40 people there, students, and 20, almost 20 teachers. And that is a way to listen to each other, to get to know each other. And as you know, in Georgia, there were more ESL programs available, but the funds have been cut. And those who are undocumented, it's very hard at this moment to find a free program for them to participate. So that is an opportunity for churches. Fundraising, as Caroline said, we created a special fund for immigrants and refugees, and we are trying to, with that fund, try to help small amounts of money to people who are in need. And in this, we invite the community to do a cookout and invite the neighbors to come and buy the food in order to build up a fund for these purposes. So 10 ways. There are more, and again, I make a copy for those who are interested to go over this and find even more exciting ways to help our brothers and sisters in Christ.
Introduce you real quick.
Do you need to say something?
Oh, I was just going to introduce you. Oh, this is Tom Hagan. He's the executive director of New Sanctuary. Is that the title you're using? New Sanctuary, one thing that can feel very overwhelming as you start to get involved in all this is it's how do I tap in, how do I connect? Well, one way is through participating in an organization like New Sanctuary, where you can meet other members of other faith communities who are already active in this area. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's programs and initiatives we can just tap into. So Tom is going to tell us something about that.
Thank you. I feel like the alien in the midst, the Presbyterian in the midst of the Episcopalians. But I have deep connections to Episcopalians, so I'm really happy to be here. I asked Carolyn if she would join me, and I have a little opening that I'd like to do. My name is Adam.
My name is Eve.
We are immigrants. My name is Noah. I am an immigrant. My name is Abraham.
My name is Sarah.
We are immigrants. My name is Lot. I am an immigrant. My name is Jacob. I am an immigrant. My name is Joseph. I am an immigrant. My name is Moses. I am an immigrant.
My name is Miriam. I am an immigrant.
My name is Joshua. I am an immigrant.
My name is Naomi. I am an immigrant.
My name is Daniel. I am an immigrant. My name is Joseph.
My name is Mary.
We are immigrants. My name is Jesus. I am an immigrant. Thank you. I shared those words with my congregation, Columbia Presbyterian Church, earlier this year, and I asked them, what do you make of that? How do we, as a nation, as a church, respond to the plight of immigrants, to the aliens in our midst? How do we respond Do we shut the door to our immigrants? Do we support the building of walls and mass deportations? Or do we welcome the stranger in our midst as God commands us? Or do we put 11 million immigrants into a single box, label them as criminals, rapists, terrorists, and send them back to wherever they came from? Or do we look into the eyes of each individual face of mothers, of fathers, of children, and listen to their stories, the stories of fear, the stories of survival, the stories of hope, and then walk beside them in their journey? That was the challenge we faced at Columbia Presbyterian Church early this year when I asked the people, what should we do? How should we respond? And there was only one answer: yes, we will welcome the immigrant. So in February of this year, our governing board, what we call our session, unanimously agreed to become a safe sanctuary church. We would be willing to bring an immigrant, whoever it is, a mother or a father or even an entire family, into our church to keep them together so they could live in safety, so that they could remain together as a family and continue their fight to live in their new homeland, the United States. But there was one caveat. There was no way that little Columbia Presbyterian Church all by itself could shelter someone or an entire family all by itself. We're not a big church with lots of resources. We would need help. And that's when we helped birth the new sanctuary movement of Atlanta, an interfaith, multicultural immigrant rights organization that would welcome the participation of both faith communities and individuals who covenant with us that all human beings are loved by their Creator and deserving of a safe place to live, work, and worship without fear, without regard to nationality, ethnicity, religion, economic status, immigration status, gender, ability, age, or sexual orientation. And there are other things that we believe in, and I've got those on a piece of paper on the back table there with lots of extra information that you can read about what we claim we are and we will do. So I'm here today to encourage you to support the mothers and the fathers and the children who live in fear that one or more members of their family might be picked up by ICE and be deported back to a world from which they had escaped, and dropped back into a world of hopelessness and despair, and unfortunately for many, a death sentence. I'm here today to encourage you to join with us in the new sanctuary movement of Atlanta, and to walk together in the journey with the immigrants who only seek to live and work in a country that has already become their new home, a country that has absolutely no need to fear the immigrant, none. But we should be welcoming him because they literally are the future of our nation. Immigrants have always been the future of our nation. You don't have to shelter someone in your church to become a participant in the sanctuary movement. You just have to be willing to come alongside the immigrant. And as Jose mentioned, one of the most important things to be done, and we're doing it now, is listening to the immigrant. How do we support them? We're not some kind of great saviors on a horseback. No. How do we support them? To find ways to support them in their journey, to provide them with hope once again in the future that seems in our culture today we are denying them of their very dignity. The flyer I brought that I said is on the back table, there are many ways that your congregations or you individually can participate in our education committee, our advocacy committee, our rapid response, to even spending a night in a shift at the church if a family is ever brought in the safe sanctuary at Columbia. We cannot do this alone. It's going to take a monumental collaborative effort, but there's no doubt in my mind that that's the way it should be done. We should be doing this together. You see, when I speak of sanctuary, I'm talking about God's law. I'm talking about taking a stand of love and justice in the face of oppression and indifference. I'm talking about standing with the immigrant families when the rest of the world seems to care less about them. I'm talking about preventing children from being separated from their parents. I'm talking about obeying the commands of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, to love our neighbor as ourselves. And who is my neighbor? Is anyone excluded? Not in the eyes of Jesus Christ. It's just that sometimes God's law stands in opposition to the laws of the land. And when it does, we as Christians are called to make a choice. It's never an easy choice, but sometimes we are called to make a choice if we are going to be disciples of Jesus Christ, to walk that line. As pointed out in these words from our denomination's recently adopted Belhar Confession from South Africa. We believe that in obedience to Jesus Christ, its only head, the church is called to confess and to do all these things, even though the authorities and human laws might forbid them, and punishment and suffering be their consequence. In closing, I want to share with you a story about a little church, not much larger than my own church out in Tucson, Arizona, that lives out that hospitality of Jesus Christ. It's called Southside Presbyterian Church, and they are on the front line of what is known as the sanctuary movement. They've been there since the 80s. Located just 60 miles from the Mexican border, this church opened up its doors to the strangers in their midst. One such stranger, Rosa Robles Loreto, the mother of 2 boys and a loving husband, she had lived in Tucson since 1999. She had been an accountant in Mexico, but realized that working as a house cleaner in the U.S. would provide a better living for her family. She was a very active member of the community, volunteering at her Catholic church and her son's schools and even on their baseball teams. But one day, out of the blue, she received an order to be deported for a minor traffic violation. She had absolutely no criminal record, but that traffic stop put her in detention for 61 days. Her lawyer gave her 3 options: leave her family behind and go back to Mexico, or try to evade deportation by moving to a new address, or enter into sanctuary and fight for her right to be with her family. She chose to enter the safe sanctuary of Southside Presbyterian, and there, for the next 14 months, surrounded by the support of many churches and the entire community, Rosa and her family lived within the walls of that church. After 461 days, with much prayer and that support, Rosa finally left sanctuary in that church when an agreement with the government was reached, enabling her to remain there in Tucson with her family. Recalling those months of sanctuary, Southside's pastor, Reverend Allison Harrington, said, "We realize that we don't find true solidarity in the moments when the work is easy, but rather in the moments when we don't know if we have any hope left." The Sanctuary Movement of Atlanta is there to serve and walk with our immigrant mothers and fathers and children. That's who we are, and I invite you to consider being a part of that as a church, as individuals. And also, I'm going to ask Megan, could you come up for just a moment? Megan she's an Episcopalian who has been working diligently on this program with me and has an announcement.
Good afternoon. I think Tom said we're actually creating a movement, which we hope will be statewide. The systems issues here are so deep, it's going to take many years. But the first start is trying to teach people how to organize. I was a professional organizer for 4 years in the Northeast, working with immigrants, most of them undocumented, and many of them women who are domestic workers. So the seeding of a movement requires people who are trained how to organize. And so we're going to offer a workshop on September 16th with the Executive Director of Freedom University, Dr. Laura Emiko-Soltis, and she's going to be presenting on Marshall Ganz's theory of public narrative. If anyone knows Marshall Ganz, he was the son of a rabbi. He left Harvard when he was an undergrad to work here in the South in the civil rights movement. And he's involved with the farm workers. He worked with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. And we've invited Emiko to lead us in how we can all become organizers and help transform the state of Georgia for justice for the immigrant community. So I'm going to pass these out, and you're all welcome to come. Thank you very much. Oh, back table? Okay.
Well, I'm sure you all want to hear about the legal system and what's going on these days. And we have a wonderful speaker in Danielle Claffey, and I'm so glad that she's here with us, and I know you'll enjoy listening to her knowledge and updates of what's going on right now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you for having me. I've spoken at a few of the churches recently, at St. Bede's about a month and a half ago, at Columbia Presbyterian before that, and so I've really been able to get involved with this community and also being part of the New Sanctuary movement. The thing that I love to say that I've said a couple of times is that I've been practicing immigration law for a little over 10 years at this point, and for all these years we've done a lot of outreach and speaking to immigrants in the community, documented, undocumented, everywhere in between. Just in the last 6 months, 10 months since the beginning of the year, this is the first time that I've just been really inspired by the fact that when I'm coming out to speak to groups like this, it's not necessarily a room full of immigrants, undocumented or otherwise. Some, sure, maybe, but I love really seeing how many Americans are coming out that want to see how they can become part of this and how they can really help their fellow immigrant community. It's really important to me. I can't even tell you for sure how I really got into immigration law. I don't have a strong or close immigrant background. My grandfather immigrated to the United States from Italy when long before, and then passed away when I was very young. So I never heard his story and all of the details and coming through Ellis Island and that sort of thing. So I can't give you my specific reason other than the fact that as I started to hear stories when I was in college, just at random, I found them fascinating. You know, stories that were so different than mine, where I grew up in Long Island, Irish, Italian, Catholic. You know, it was very, just like all of my friends, you know, except for my Jewish friends. So that was basically all I knew. So the more I really heard about these unique stories, I said, you know what, that's something I'd really love to do. And in conjunction with going to law school, this is where I found myself. So it's the only thing I've ever done professionally is practice immigration law, and it's the only thing I plan to do from here on out. So the funny thing is, you know, we of course know that there's so much profiling going on and so much directed at the Hispanic community. And I also want to say it's not just that, of course, in the Muslim community and all kinds of other faiths and cultures, and from Kenya and Ghana. I have so many clients from everywhere. But I will tell you this, my last name is Claffey because my husband is Irish. Irish-born, immigrated here about 20 years ago. And so, of course, he's got a close-knit group of friends who are all Irish. And one of his best friends was talking to us the other day and said, I called a potential client, speaking to her on the phone, trying to set up an appointment, and her response was, well, that's fine, but you need to start speaking English the way that we do. You're in our country now. Okay, he's been here also for 20 years with an Irish accent, which I happen to love. But he said, excuse me, I'm sorry, but I am speaking English. And she said, yeah, but the way that we do. You're in our country now, you need to learn to do it our way. Shocking to me, absolutely shocking. I thought I had seen it all, heard it all, but it's just another example of something new and different, and it's because people feel emboldened. They feel powerful, they feel like they've given the right to say and do whatever they please, and that nobody is going to stand up to them because they're the ones that are in control. But the best way that we can counter bullying, of course, is to stand up to it, to do what we can to help all of these people. And with all of our resources and the power and the education, the legal education and everything else, to just offer as much assistance as we can, because with enough work and enough time, obviously we will overcome this. I mean, I'm very impressed with Lindsey Graham. I can't say that I would have had that thought and those feelings a few years ago. Maybe I had a different perspective, right? But now I'm shocked and I'm amazed and I'm really inspired and hopeful. We almost had the DREAM Act passed a few years ago, and it was, unfortunately, it missed it by a few votes. So I'm confident that at some point it really will, and so it is going to require those calls and the effort to really put into making sure that people understand and coming from the religious perspective and to try to provide that motivation and the influence. So I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that DACA will not disappear in the coming days. Of course, we don't know what's going to happen. And as they mentioned earlier, the biggest difference between DACA and the DREAM Act is the path to permanent resident status, the path to citizenship, whereas DACA is only a temporary status. So we can only remain hopeful there. So what I want to do today is, I can keep talking forever. I can talk about immigration law until, somebody's going to have to tell me to stop if I don't remember on my own, so just do something like this, okay? I want to give you just 2 case examples, sort of a day in the life of what I do and what the last, week or 2 has been like for me with work. And I think this is a good way to represent this. One case I want to talk about is tomorrow morning. Some of you may be familiar with the Atlanta immigration court system, the Stewart immigration court system. Maybe some of you have ever gone to court before. As was mentioned earlier, going to immigration court and sitting in on hearings can be extremely powerful. Those judges feel very powerful in their own right sitting on the bench, issuing orders of deportation or voluntary departure, or denying 97% of asylum applications that are presented to the judges here in Atlanta, and even more so, 98% down in Stewart Detention Center. But I can tell you, I have witnessed individuals, members of the public, sitting in on those hearings, and the more that I see the judges sort of fall into line, and they tend to be a bit more reasonable. Even if it's just a matter of being more civilized in court, when they see others that probably shouldn't be in there, probably don't have a hearing scheduled, the more I see that they tend to be a little bit more reserved and sometimes even just a little bit kinder. So it is really, really important, and just to even educate yourselves and really learn about how the immigration court system works, and what it's really like for us going in every day, and what it's really like for family members as well. Because one of the problems that we see is when we're representing a client who's in immigration court proceedings, chances are, 9 times out of 10, their immediate family members are also without status. Their spouses are without status. So we have to advise those wives or husbands or whomever it is, no, you can't come to court. We can't advise you that it's safe to come to court because you're walking into the lion's den. You're walking into a place where ICE is right upstairs, and we don't want you to risk that. So a lot of times they're sitting at home waiting to hear what's happened. So if they feel like there's more support on their side, I think that can really, really help in a lot of those situations. So tomorrow, for example, I had an old friend from law school that I haven't seen since law school contact me about a month ago, and he practices general practice down in South Georgia. And he said, you know what, I came across this woman. Her husband's been picked up. He's being detained. He's being held at Irwin County Detention Center, which is the detention center in southeast Georgia where the individuals appear in court in Atlanta. So that's different than Stewart. He said, could you maybe reach out to her? So I called her. Very nice woman, and I heard just screaming kids in the background. I mean, it sounded like she was in the middle of teaching class, just a classroom full of students. Well, it wasn't. It was her children. It was their children. They have 8 children, okay? 8 U.S. citizen-born children, all under the age of 14, all of which she is caring for every single day, as she has been, but on top of it now, the responsibility of no income whatsoever because her husband's detained. He is detained. He's a Mexican national. He's been here for 20-some-odd years. He has 0 criminal history but for a disorderly conduct arrest for getting into an argument with somebody on the 4th of July. That's it. Nothing else. Never did anything else. Hard worker, providing for his family, and that's it. And so she said to me, so we began talking, and I said what we could do, and legal fees, and this and that, and everything that would be involved. And then I didn't hear from her for a couple of days. And I knew he had a hearing that was scheduled out, a regular hearing, not a bond hearing. So I called her to follow up because I figured she's probably got a lot going on. So I gave her a call and she said, well, you know what, I talked to my husband and he decided he's just going to go ahead and sign his papers to be removed because we can't afford anything. We have no money. He's not even home to be able to work to pay for legal fees or pay for a bond or anything like that. And I said, well, I mean, of course we're a for-profit firm, but we also take pro bono cases. What am I going to do with this case? Of course I'm going to take the case. Of course I'm going to let her know. Let's see what we can do. We'll at least see if we can get him released. We can talk about legal fees after that and we'll see where we are. And I also reached out to the Mexican consulate, which is why it's important who you know, what contacts you have. So I reached out to them. They're also going to be providing assistance to this family as well, just because I contacted them, explained the story. All their kids, for the most part, are healthy, but for their 2-year-old, second to youngest, was born with club feet. He's had several surgeries. He wears braces on his feet and his ankles. He's going to require many additional surgeries in the future, undetermined, and he has physical therapy every week. So yet another reason why Mom has a lot going on. In any case, his bond hearing is now scheduled for tomorrow morning. For somebody to be heard on a bond hearing before the immigration court, I have to file a formal request. So an individual can't just say, can I have a bond? Will you set a bond for me? No, we have to file a request, submit evidence, it gets scheduled, and then we appear. So I'm going to appear tomorrow morning before one of the most difficult judges in Atlanta, and he's one of the older ones, he's been around for a long time, and I'm going to beg and plead for the minimum bond, which is $1,500. They cannot set a bond amount that's any lower than $1,500. If I can get that, and this is just to give a picture of how this will happen, if I can successfully get a $1,500 bond, then the family, she has said to me that hopefully she's going to be able to work with neighbors and friends and some other family to gather those funds to be able to take care of that bond. We get them bonded out, and what will happen at this point then is as long as we can get him bonded out, he will be going through the immigration court removal proceedings process for the next several years, which means he'll also be able to obtain what's called work authorization, where he can get a work card on an annual basis because it's based on the application for a green card he's filing with the court. What we're then going to file for him is an application called cancellation of removal for non-permanent residents. The reason I mention this is because it's the single most common application that is filed by an individual that is referred to immigration court. The reason is because you can only file cancellation if you are referred to an immigration judge. So I have people coming to me all the time saying, wait a minute, can I file this 10-year green card application? And I say, no, unfortunately you can't. You can only do it if you have to appear before a judge. Well, what do I have to do to appear before a judge? Well, you have to get arrested. Okay, literally. And I've had that question, I can't tell you how many times over the years. Unfortunately now, we don't even have to really joke about it anymore because enforcement obviously is on such a rapid increase that it does just naturally happen now quite often. So hopefully what's going to happen for this family is, even though it seemed like some very dark days for them initially, you know, assuming I'm able to get bond tomorrow morning, get him released, get him work authorization to be able to drive, to work legally, and so on. We have a very real possibility of presenting not just a case for a green card application, but a strong case for a green card application, where we'll be able to show that it's going to cause an exceptional level of hardship to those 8 children, particularly the one with medical issues, if dad's not permitted to remain in the United States and become a lawful permanent resident. So that kind of just gives you a sort of a quick overview of what can happen from the point somebody gets picked up, put in proceedings, bonded out, and what they may be able to file in the future. So I don't think I have too much more time left, and I'm happy to answer any questions after. I know my information is in the booklet, so feel free to reach out to me, or if you'd ever like me to come speak to anybody or answer any questions for any immigrant friends or otherwise. Okay? Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
So before I bring our dear bishop up here, we have 4 tables in the back because we want to get some action items going out of this group. We don't want you to just come in here and hear this and not leave without. So we've got 4 areas: education, visitation, rapid response. And we're going to do rapid response in conjunction with Mark Reeve, who's heading it out through New Sanctuary Movement. I've already talked to them. They're just getting started, so we are starting at the beginning here for all of us. And the other is just for distribution. If you wish to be on our distribution list, please sign up for that, and we'll send you out information as we get it, and new things that are coming up. That's all I'm going to say. That's my presentation. And now I bring you our Bishop Robert Wright.
So, good afternoon. You've been sitting a while and been hearing some good information, and I don't want to gild the lily here. I was tardy because I was at a funeral at All Saints. I was burying my dear friend Allison Pritchett, spouse of Harry Pritchett, who is beloved in this diocese. And so I'm glad to join you, though, now. And I want to just back up a little bit and give my welcome to my brother, Bishop Jose McLoughlin. I was so excited that he was going to be with us. He represents in the flesh, those wonderful extremes, as Scottish as he is. I'm sorry, Irish, as he is Cuban. Careful, yeah. As he is Cuban priest and now bishop, as much as he was a law enforcement officer. And so I think he, in his body, creates this wonderful sweet spot to be able to have a conversation. And I'm very glad that he's come, because I think that he maybe uniquely can articulate for us why this work is beyond partisanship. And I think that's what the church really needs to hear, lay and ordained, why this work is really beyond partisanship. This is who we are. This is not cause celeb. This is not in response to any political candidate. This is who we have been, and so I'm so grateful that you reminded us who we have been, all through Scripture, who we have been. And I told the young lawyer from Long Island that we will pay the $1,500. If she can get the bond down, we'll pay it. So, yeah. Mine is a bit of a mishmash, but I just wanted to say Bishop Jose was whispering back and forth, and he was saying some wonderful things to me. And one that every year the Tuesday in Holy Week, priests gather for renewal of vows, and he quietly charged, or at least highlighted for us, that maybe we should give away our offering collected at that service towards legal aid. I like that, and so perhaps if we are convening people around the Diocese of Atlanta or beyond, maybe we could start to take up those kinds of collections to assist. I know that these lawyers are doing it out of a really big heart and a deep commitment, and don't have a lot of cash, and so one of the things we can do is do that, is to collect funds, and those generous people that are in our midst, perhaps direct them a little bit towards this kind of really good and wonderful work. I think the other thing that Bishop Jose said, and you correct me if I get it wrong, is that what he said to me, how powerful it would be to have our clergy to be present at these hearings in the collar, just being there, occupying space, being present, perhaps aiding, assisting with comfort and care and succor, whatever we can do, encouragement. And so I invite you and charge you. We remember that Brian Stevenson was with us here in the diocese not long ago, and I was just talking to Chip Edens up in Christ Church in I guess it's Charlotte, and I was recalling for him that he said, Brian Stevenson, that is, at St. Luke's some time ago, that he said the one thing that we can do, you and I, every man and woman sitting here, is that we can close the gap. We can give the ministry of proximity. So you and I can take this, that's why I love this, right? Discussion and action, right? You and I can take this information, take our hearts, take our energy, and we can close the gap. We can go these places, we can sit these places, we can observe for ourselves, we can get a sense of things ourselves, and then we can turn around and be advocate wherever we find ourselves. I can't remember exactly right now who invited me to go to Stewart Detention Center. Was it you, Juan? It was somebody, I don't know. I end up all kinds of troublesome places. And I was so grateful for the glimpse that I got there. And I happen to think we can find the sweet spot. I want, as one politician is known to say, I want the bad hombres gone. I do. If you're a convicted felon, or you're a felon and you're causing danger to public safety, I want you gone. Right? The thing about it is that represents a small percentage of the people we're talking about right now. More people are like the people we've just heard about. And more people are like the people who greeted me at one of our congregations in the Diocese of Atlanta after the service, who came to me, a woman came up to me with 2 crying teenage daughters and said, "Can't you do something to help us?" My husband has never been in trouble, never ever been in trouble. He got pulled over for a rolling stop at a stop sign. If that's a damn crime, I'm going to hell, let me tell you. He was pulled over, found to not possess any documents, and then was carted away to Stewart Detention Center. And then, deported because of the love of his 2 daughters. I mean, all this is happening with 2 little girls crying to me. Because of the love of his daughters and his wife, because he was trying to do what any father in this room would do, any parent would do in this room, he goes through hell to get back in this country. And then is arrested, just trying to get back home, just trying to provide for his family, all the things we say we're about in this country. And now he's incarcerated. And how do we pry him loose out of that? I don't know. So those are the folks we're talking about normatively. Or we're talking about Jose, who just did my backyard at home. I mean, Beth and I wrote the check and gave it to the Anglo friend, who then commissioned the work, and then Jose and his crew came. And Jose has done a number of projects for us at the house, and we just had a conversation. I'm sure I'm speaking just like the rest of some of you are speaking with folks. And so in the course of them doing wonderful labor around our house, we're having a conversation. I said, hey man, what's this like for you guys? All the bombast, right? And all of that. What's that like? He said, my people are terrified. We just want to feed families. We want to send most of that money home. But we're terrified. We don't go to church now. So, I mean, this is really real past any sort of, gain speaking about all of this. This is real. This is lowering the ceiling height on people's dignity. And so that's where we come in, right? One of my pet peeves in all this kind of conversation is we keep using immigration issue. We're talking about people. We're talking about men and women, boys and girls, fathers, mothers, grandparents. We're talking about folks. So we've got to remember that. We're talking about people and families. I long for the day where America's greatness will be defined by having secure borders, but not at the cost of people's dignity. I think we can do both in this country. I think this country actually is great enough to secure its borders and give people dignity. And I do dream of the day when we find a path to citizenship for people. People who have demonstrated their ability to come, to be a part of the fabric of this country and add value to it. I want those people here. I want to be alongside them. I want my children to know them and see from their example. So I just want to finish by saying how proud I am of you on a rainy Wednesday, making time to be here. I know that we've all got lots of things to do, and calendars are on overflow. I know. And yet, to see that Juan and Fabio and other people, Caroline, other people have really put this work together makes me awfully proud of the Diocese of Atlanta. And that I hope that you will hear something here, gain a little bit of inspiration, but more than inspiration, because, we can preach it to death, right? More than inspiration, I hope you'll pick up a few new dance steps at the back table about how to organize, about how to convene, about what to do, about what you can invite people to do, and let's get to work on that. Thank you to the sister who wanted to help us organize. Where'd she go? She left her information. Yeah, the woman who came up with you. She here? Where's she at? Yeah. Thank you for her, because I think that's where it is. We're not going to be able to Facebook like the kingdom of God into existence. You know that, don't you? Now, we have to like things on Facebook. I mean, God knows I post enough on Facebook. I want you to like it, right? But Nancy Yancey knows this, and other people in this room know this. The rubber hits the road is what you roll your sleeves up and get to work doing. And so you're here, and I couldn't be more proud of that. So now how do we turn this thing into some action that sets the captives free, right? And, and just because the lawyers are around and we've already talked to the chancellors and all kinds of stuff just to try to keep me out of jail, I want you to know that I will do my level best, and you have my word, to partner with you and to provide cover for you as the bishop of the diocese if you take these actions towards justice. Okay? I will do my very best. I will do my level best to provide cover for you and support you and partner with you if you take these next steps toward welcoming the immigrant, the alien, the stranger in our midst, because that's what our commitment to Jesus Christ would have us to do. So thank you very much. Thank you to Bishop Jose for driving down here in the rain. Thank you to all of you for being present. I think there may be an occasion to take some questions. I won't, yeah, Dawn says about 10 minutes for that. But again, thank you so much.
So as the Bishop said, we can't do it by ourselves. It's in your hands now. So those sign-up sheets are back there to help us in the different areas that you'd like to go to, even if you're just doing letter writing for some of these people. Also, there's handouts in the back. These are famous red cards that are really good. There's some I've printed up several hundred back in the back. Please pick one up and take it with you. You can also get them for free if you go to that website. And I think it's listed on the back there. But it's the immigration legal assistance, I think it's called. Anyhow, we get you all that information by email. If we have your email address, we'll get it to you. So now we'll take questions. If you have questions, if you'll come up to the microphone, we've got about 10 minutes left.
I don't have so much as a question, but my mom had me come here because I've done something with the action here I want to share with you guys. I've got an app that's coming out in probably less than a month. My name is Mbai Njai, and I'm the founder of Legal Equalizer, and I have an app that'll be coming out in less than a month. It's being tested now, and hopefully some of y'all can help me test it. The app came from my experiences. First, I'm an immigrant here, but it also came from my experiences from being pulled over by police. And so it's an app where when you got pulled over, you could hit a button, let 5 loved ones know you've been pulled over with your exact location and in your rights. But since then, we've added more because I felt like we had to include more than just police situations. So we now have situations for immigration. So in ICE encounters, we have it for domestic violence and just general emergency. So it's called Legal Equalizer. So for instance, like right now, if I have it, I pull up here, let's say I got immigration on my door. I hit this button, I hit the immigration ICE button, and I send a text message. My mom will get it in a minute, and it'll give her the exact directions and Google map direction, pinpoint to where I'm at. Next, we have Know Your Rights. So immigration, what to do in a home encounter, what to do in public encounter, additional tips and rights, and constitutional rights. You can record it as well, so you can record your entire encounter. We're looking to make it live stream eventually. And the only hold up right now, which we're working on, is we're working to get attorneys on there. So you can then call an immigration attorney ahead of time, because what we're working on is, I'm tired of the stories of attorneys coming in after they've been put in jail, where if we can have a system where, hey, here's an app, I've got the recording, my loved ones know, let's call the attorney now. The attorney tells me what to do when ICE is there before you get locked up. And if you do get locked up, now the attorney has video and knows exactly what happened from the moment of the actual encounter rather than after it. So afterwards, I would love to meet some of you guys, have you guys test it out if you have attorneys.
If you could also send me that information, I'll make sure that it gets out to people.
Definitely. So that was it. Thank you.
What, there's no other questions? Wow, that's amazing. John? The resources, if you want them, get on the distribution list, and that's in the back. Write your names on there. We're not going to send it to you if you don't want it, but we'll send you new things as they come up and make sure that they get into your hands. And other information that you may have that you may share with me, my email address is on your booklets on the back. So you can send that to me, and some of it we have to run through our chancellor, but what we don't, I'll get directly to you. So that's all there is on that. I don't want to take any more time up.